Imagine you are sitting at the long mahogany table, in the center of a glass-walled conference room. The air is heavy with the smell of stale coffee and aggressive ambition. To your left, a marketing director is raising his voice to prove a point that barely holds water. To your right, a sales lead is interrupting him just to assert dominance. The noise is constant. It is a wall of sound designed to intimidate and control. Most people look at this chaotic scene and assume the power belongs to the ones making the noise. We have been conditioned by society to believe that charisma is volume, and leadership is the ability to fill the silence with words. But you know better. You are the quietest person in the room, and that is precisely why you are the most dangerous. While they are busy, exhausting their oxygen, trying to be seen, you are busy seeing everything else. You notice the slight tremble in the executive's hand when the quarterly figures are mentioned. You catch the quick, terrified glance. The junior analyst shoots at the door. You are not disengaged or shy. You are processing a stream of nonverbal data that the loudspeakers are completely missing because they are too in love with the sound of their own voices. This is not a social defect. It is a tactical position. In a world that cannot stop talking, the person who listens holds all the cards. You are not hiding. You are waiting. You are gathering the ammunition that will win the argument before you even open your mouth. This is the hidden mechanics of power that culture ignores. Welcome to the introvert's advantage, the cult of personality. To understand the introvert's advantage, we must first understand the battlefield. We must examine the noisy stage upon which modern life is played. There is a prevailing belief that has seeped into the bedrock of our society. It is the idea that the loudest voice is the truest voice, and that the most charismatic person in the room is the most competent. This is not merely a habit or a preference. It is a cultural phenomenon that historians and psychologists call the cult of personality. It was not always this way. If you were to travel back in time to the 19th century, you would find a very different set of values governing human behavior. Historians often refer to this earlier era as the culture of character. In that world, what mattered most was how you behaved when no one was looking. The ideal self was serious, disciplined and honorable. Citizens were judged by their integrity, their morals, and the substance of their deeds. A man or woman could be reserved, quiet, or even shy and still be considered a pillar of the community. In fact, a certain degree of reticence was seen as a sign of dignity. The man of few words was respected because it was assumed that when he did speak, he had something essential to say. But as the 20th century approached, the world began to change. The economy shifted from agriculture to industry. People migrated from small, close-knit towns where everyone knew their neighbors to bustling, anonymous cities. In a small town, your reputation preceded you. Your character was known. But in a city full of strangers, character was invisible. You had to prove your worth instantly. You had to perform. This marked the transition to the culture of personality. Suddenly, the advice manuals changed. They stopped talking about virtue and duty and started talking about magnetism and fascination. The goal was no longer to be good, but to be liked. The ideal self became the dominant self. We began to value the salesman over the thinker and the showman over the craftsman. We started to equate a gregarious personality with leadership capability. This shift created a distinct hierarchy. At the top sat the extrovert, the person who could command attention, who could speak without thinking, and who thrived in the spotlight, became the archetype of success. Our schools began to favor group projects over independent study. Our offices tore down walls to create open floor plans, forcing constant interaction and removing the sanctuary of silence. We built a world that insists we must be constantly broadcasting our thoughts to be relevant. This brings us to the great illusion of our time. We often mistake confidence for competence. In psychology, there is a concept often described as the Babel hypothesis. It suggests that, in a group setting, the person who talks the most is likely to be perceived as the leader, regardless of the quality of their ideas. We are biologically wired to pay attention to the most dominant presence in the room. We assume that high energy equates to high intelligence. We follow the noise. But this is where the cracks in the foundation appear. While the culture of personality worships the spotlight, it often ignores the reality of how progress is actually made. If you look at the history of innovation, art, and profound leadership, you will find that the greatest leaps forward rarely happen in a crowded room, full of shouting voices. They happen in solitude. They happen in the quiet moments of deep focus, where an individual can think without interruption. This is where the introvert begins to cultivate their advantage. While the extrovert is busy performing, the introvert is busy observing. In a meeting, while others are fighting for airtime to assert their dominance, the introvert is sitting back and processing the dynamics of the room. They are listening, not just to respond, but to understand. They are noticing the subtle shifts in body language, the hesitation in a colleague's voice, and the flaws in the argument that is being presented with such bluster. Because they are not consumed by the need to be the center of attention. Introverts retain a cognitive surplus. They have the mental energy to analyze, to connect disparate dots, and to formulate complex solutions. The loud person is often reacting to the immediate stimulus. The quiet person is playing the long game. Consider the nature of true strength. Is strength the ability to shout down an opponent, or is it the ability to remain composed when the world is chaotic? The cult of personality tells us that to be strong, we must be aggressive, but there is a different kind of strength found in stillness. It is the strength of the grandmaster. Looking at the chessboard, the grandmaster does not need to wave his arms or raise his voice. He simply needs to move a single piece to change the outcome of the game. The introvert's power lies in this precision. In a world of constant noise, the person who speaks only when necessary commands a different kind of authority. When the quiet person finally speaks, the room often falls silent. People instinctively know that the words have been weighed and measured. They know that what is coming is not a performance, but a conclusion. We must also recognize the cost of this cultural obsession with personality. When we design our institutions solely for the extrovert, we lose the contributions of the deep thinkers. We overlook the quiet employee who has the solution to the problem. Because they cannot find an opening in the conversation, we promote the manager who gives a great presentation over the manager who builds deep loyal connections with their team. We sacrifice depth for breadth and substance for style. The advantage of the introvert is the ability to resist this pull. It is the capacity to be alone without being lonely. It is the ability to do the heavy lifting of the mind without the need for an audience. While the world demands that you put yourself out there, the introvert understands the value of going inward. This is not to say that personality does not matter, or that charm has no place. But we must dismantle the myth that volume equals value. We must learn to look past the dazzle of the spotlight and see the quiet machinery that is actually driving the engine. The cult of personality is a facade. It is a thin veneer over the complexities of human potential, the real work. The work that changes. The world is almost always done quietly. It is written in silent rooms. It is calculated on solitary walks. It is built by people who have mastered the art of shutting out the noise, so they can hear themselves think. The introvert does not need to win the room. They are playing a different game entirely. They are looking for the truth that lies beneath the noise. If you are the type of person who appreciates a thoughtful approach to the complexities of the mind and human behavior, I invite you to join us on this journey. We explore these hidden dynamics every week. Please take a moment to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. The data gatherer. Picture a crowded boardroom. On a Tuesday morning, the air is thick with the smell of stale coffee and the electric hum of ambition. Voices overlap, as ideas are thrown against the wall with the force of a hailstorm. The extroverts are in their element. They are thinking out loud. They are building momentum through speech. They are dominating the acoustic space, because that is how they navigate the world. To the casual observer, it looks like leadership, it looks like engagement, it looks like strength, but sit back in your chair and shift your gaze. Look away from the person at the head of the table, waving their hands. Look away from the sales director, shouting numbers. Look to the corner of the room. There sits someone who has not spoken in 20 minutes. Their posture is still. Their eyes are moving. They are not checked out. They are not daydreaming. They are doing something. The loud people are too busy to do. They are gathering data. This is the hidden engine of the introvert. In a culture that fetishizes rapid response and immediate feedback, we often mistake silence for emptiness. We assume that if nothing is coming out, then nothing is going on inside. That assumption is not just wrong, it is dangerously wrong. The quiet person in the room is not inactive, they are running a complex internal simulation that the loud person cannot even perceive. While the extrovert processes information by speaking it into existence, the introvert processes information by pulling it apart in the privacy of their own mind. Think of it as the difference between a live broadcast and a meticulously edited film. The extrovert is live on air. Mistakes happen. Corrections are made in real time. It is exciting and dynamic. The introvert is in the editing bay. They are reviewing the footage. They are checking the sound levels. They are cutting the fluff. They are waiting until the final cut is perfect before they hit play. This segment is about the mechanics of that editing bay. It is about the immense strategic advantage of the data gatherer. When an introvert sits quietly in a chaotic environment, they are acting as a high-fidelity recording device, because they are not expending energy. On projecting their own persona, they have a surplus of energy available for observation. They notice that the client shifted uncomfortably when the price was mentioned. They notice the quick glance the CEO shot at the CFO when the timeline was proposed. They hear the subtle tremor of uncertainty in a confident presentation. This is the superpower of low gain. In signal processing, high gain means you amplify everything, including the noise. Low gain means you reduce the noise, so you can hear the signal. Introverts are naturally low-gain creatures. They turn down the volume of their own ego, so they can hear the frequency of the room. Consider the biological reality of this. We know that introverts have a different reaction to dopamine compared to their extroverted counterparts. They do not need the same level of external stimulation to feel satisfied. In fact, too much external stimulation can feel overwhelming. So, they retreat, but they do not retreat into nothingness. They retreat into analysis. The data gatherer is constantly building a map of reality. Every conversation is a data point. Every failed project is a case study. Every emotional outburst they witness is a lesson in human psychology. While the extrovert is busy shaping the world, the introvert is busy understanding it. This often leads to a phenomenon that frustrates the loud and the impatient. It is the pause. You ask an introvert a question, and there is a gap. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. In a fast-paced culture, this silence feels awkward. It feels like hesitation. It might even look like incompetence. The extrovert wants to fill that silence immediately. They want to bridge the gap. But you must understand what is happening in those 3 seconds. The introvert is accessing the library. They are cross-referencing your question with every piece of data they have gathered over the last hour, the last week, or the last year. They are simulating the consequences of 3 different answers. They are checking for accuracy. They are stripping away the emotion. They are formulating a response that is not just noise, but is actually a solution. The loud person gives you the first answer that comes to mind. The data gatherer gives you the best answer they can construct. This advantage becomes undeniable when the stakes are high. In a crisis, panic is often the result of acting without sufficient data. We see this in history, time and time again. The leaders who react impulsively to a threat often exacerbate the problem. They move armies before they know the terrain. They sign contracts before reading the fine print. They scream at employees before understanding the error. The introvert, however, is inoculated against this specific type of folly. Their natural inclination to gather data, first and act second, acts as a safety valve. It is a buffer against chaos. By the time the introvert decides to move, they have usually charted the path to the end. Let us look at how this plays out in negotiation. The stereotype of a master negotiator is often the wolf, the aggressive closer who dominates the room and browbeats the opponent into submission. But actual studies on negotiation show a different reality. The most effective negotiators are often those who ask more questions than they make statements. They are the listeners. The data gatherer wins in negotiation because they let the other side show their hand. They sit back and let the other person talk. Most people, when faced with a quiet listener, will keep talking to relieve their own anxiety. They will reveal their constraints. They will reveal their deadlines. They will reveal their desperation. The introvert simply collects these gems one by one. They are counting cards at the blackjack table, while everyone else is just hoping for a lucky hit. When the data gatherer finally speaks, it lands with the weight of a judge dropping a gavel. Because they have spoken so rarely, their words carry a premium value. This is the law of supply and demand applied to communication. If you flood the market with your words, their value drops. If you ration them, their value rises. When the quiet person says, "I do not think this will work," the room stops. The room listens. Because the room knows that this person has done the math. There is a myth that needs to be dismantled here. The myth is that introverts are passive. We equate silence with passivity and noise with activity. But observation is an active state. Listening is an active state. Analysis is an active state. It is simply internal activity rather than external activity. The data gatherer is like a sniper. The soldier running across the field with a machine gun spraying bullets looks very active. They are making a lot of noise. They are drawing a lot of attention. The sniper lying perfectly still in the grass looks like they are doing nothing. They are barely breathing. They are not moving a muscle. But they are watching the wind. They are calculating the distance. They are waiting for the perfect moment. And one shot, From the sniper is worth 1,000 wasted bullets from the machine gunner. In the modern workplace and in modern relationships, we are drowning in information but starving for wisdom. We have access to all the data in the world, but we lack the patience to synthesize it. This is where the introvert steps in to save the day. They are the synthesizers. They are the ones who can look at 1,000 scattered dots and see the picture of a lion. So, if you are the quiet one, do not let the noise of the world convince you that you are broken. Do not feel the need to fill the air with empty words. Just to prove you are present, your presence is felt. In the quality of your decisions, not the volume of your voice. You are the watchman on the wall. You are the architect. Looking at the blueprints, while the laborers argue over the bricks. And if you are the loud one, looking at the quiet person across the table, do not mistake their silence for agreement. Do not mistake their stillness for weakness. They are watching you. They are learning your patterns. They are understanding your motivations better than you. Understand them yourself. They are gathering the data. And when they are ready, they will use it. The advantage of the introvert is not that they know everything instantly. It is that they are willing to wait until they know the truth. In a world of hot takes and instant reactions, the person who waits for the facts is the one who eventually owns the narrative. The tortoise does not just beat the hare because the hare is lazy. The tortoise wins because the tortoise never stops moving forward. Even if that movement is internal, the data gatherer is always working, and the work they do is the foundation upon which real success is built. The sniper and the machine gun. We live in a culture that celebrates the rapid fire. We applaud the first person to raise their hand. We reward the loudest voice in the brainstorming session. We assume that the person using the most words has the most to say. There is a pervasive myth in our professional and social lives that output equals value. If you are talking, you are working. If you are silent, you are disengaged. This is the philosophy of the machine gun. Imagine a soldier on a battlefield, armed with a heavy machine gun. When the pressure mounts and the chaos begins, this soldier pulls the trigger and does not let go. They spray bullets across the horizon. They create a wall of noise and suppression. It looks impressive. It sounds terrifying. There is dust kicking up everywhere, and the sheer volume of ammunition being expended suggests that something important is happening. But this approach has a fatal flaw. It is imprecise. It is exhausting. It wastes resources. Most of the shots hit nothing but empty air or dirt. The barrel overheats. The soldier runs out of ammunition. Long before the battle is actually won. This is how many people navigate the world. They enter a meeting and immediately fill the silence. They answer questions before they have fully heard them. They network by handing out business cards to every single person in the conference hall, hoping that one of them sticks. They believe that if they just keep firing, eventually they will hit a target. They mistake motion for progress and volume for effectiveness. Now, contrast this with the sniper. The sniper operates on an entirely different philosophy. The sniper is often invisible. They are camouflaged in the background, blending into the terrain. To the untrained eye, the sniper looks like they are doing absolutely nothing. They are still. They are silent. They are not reacting to every sudden noise or movement, but inside the mind of the sniper, there is an intense and rigorous calculation taking place. While the machine gunner is spraying the horizon, the sniper is watching. They are measuring the distance. They are gauging the wind speed. They are analyzing the behavior of the target. They are gathering the data we spoke about. in the previous chapter, and they are synthesizing it into a single calculated decision. The sniper does not fire 100 rounds to hit one target. They fire one round. And because they waited, and because they calculated, and because they did not give away their position prematurely, that one round ends the conflict. This is the hidden advantage of the introvert. In a world of machine guns, the sniper holds the power of precision. Let us look at how this plays out. In a high-stakes negotiation or a chaotic boardroom, the machine guns are blazing. People are interrupting one another, throwing out half-baked ideas and arguing over semantics. The emotional temperature in the room is rising. Everyone is competing to be heard, and because everyone is talking, no one is listening. The introvert sits and watches. They are not passive. They are observing the dynamics of the room. They notice that the CEO is getting frustrated with the lack of clarity. They notice that the marketing director is defensive about a specific metric. They see the gap between what is being said and what is actually meant. They are letting the others exhaust their ammunition. Then there is a lull. The machine guns have to reload. The loud voices take a breath. In that silence, the introvert leans forward and speaks. They do not deliver a monologue. They do not raise their voice. They ask one question or make one statement that cuts through the confusion like a laser. They might say, simply, we are solving the wrong problem. Because they have not been speaking for the last 20 minutes. Their voice carries a weight that the others lack. This is the economic principle of scarcity applied to communication. When you flood the market with currency, the value of that currency drops. It is inflation. The person who talks constantly inflates the supply of their words until each individual word is almost worthless. People stop listening because they know there is an endless supply coming. The introvert practices verbal austerity. Their words are gold. They are rare. And because they are rare, they are valuable. When the quiet person speaks, people lean in. They instinctively understand that this person does not speak just to hear the sound of their own voice. If they are breaking their silence, it must be for a reason. It must be important. This dynamic completely inverts the power structure. The loud person thinks they are dominating the room because they are occupying the sonic space, but the quiet person is actually controlling the outcome. Because they are waiting for the leverage point, consider the energy cost as well. The machine gun approach is biologically expensive, being constantly on and constantly projecting and constantly reacting. Burns through glucose and mental energy. At an alarming rate, it leads to burnout. It leads to decision fatigue. The machine gunner leaves. The meeting exhausted, regardless of the outcome. The sniper conserves energy by remaining quiet and observant. The introvert preserves their mental resources for the moment of execution. They are not fighting the friction of constant social performance. They are diverting that energy into processing and analysis. This means that when the critical moment arrives, they are fresh. Their mind is clear. They have the bandwidth to handle the complexity of the final decision, because they have not wasted their energy on the preamble. There is a military concept called force multiplication. It refers to a factor that dramatically increases the effectiveness of a group or weapon. Silence is a force multiplier. It allows you to amplify the impact of your ideas by delivering them at the precise moment they are needed most. The machine gunner is reactive. They are at the mercy of the environment. Something moves and they shoot. A phone rings and they answer. An email pops up and they reply. They are perpetually on the defensive chasing the stimulus. The sniper is proactive. They choose the engagement. They decide when to reveal themselves. They decide when the shot is taken. This is the essence of autonomy. By refusing to be drawn into the noise, the introvert retains control over their own timing. You must understand that this is not about arrogance. It is not about withholding information or refusing to participate. It is about understanding the physics of influence. Impact is not determined by how hard you strike, but by where you strike. A sledgehammer swung wildly might dent a wall, but a needle placed correctly can sever a spinal cord. The introvert is the master of the needle. They find the pressure point. They identify the structural weakness in an argument or the missing piece in a strategy. So, do not be fooled by the silence of the quiet people in your life. Do not mistake their lack of volume for a lack of confidence. Do not assume that, because they are not firing, they are not aiming. While the rest of the room is making noise, they are making a plan. While the others are seeking attention, they are seeking the target. The machine gun generates fear and chaos, but the sniper generates respect and finality. In the long game of careers and relationships and creative endeavors, it is rarely the one who makes the most noise who wins. It is the one who never misses. You have gathered your data. You have observed the terrain. You have let the others exhaust themselves. Now you are ready to take the shot, the laboratory of solitude. We have arrived at a crucial juncture in our examination of the quiet temperament. We have explored how the introvert moves through the noisy world, gathering information like a master archivist and speaking with the precision of a sniper. But there is a missing piece to this puzzle. Where does all that data go? Where is the strategy formulated? If the world is a stage, then the introvert requires a backstage, a place where the mask comes off and the real work begins. We call this the laboratory of solitude. To the extroverted mind, solitude often looks like a penalty. It looks like loneliness or isolation. It appears to be a void where nothing is happening. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the introverted mind generates value. For the quiet person, solitude is not an absence of activity. It is the presence of the self. It is a crowded room of thoughts, ideas, and synthesis. It is an active state. Consider the modern obsession with collaboration. We have been sold a very specific narrative about success in the 21st century. We are told that innovation comes from group work. We are told that the best ideas are born in brainstorming sessions where everyone shouts over one another in a glass-walled conference room. We build open-plan offices designed to maximize interaction, forcing employees to exist in a constant state of low-level social anxiety and interruption. We value the hive mind over the individual mind. But history tells a different story. If you look at the biographies of the figures who actually shifted the paradigm of human progress, you find a recurring theme. You find the laboratory of solitude. When you are constantly interacting with others, your brain is occupied with the heavy lifting of social dynamics. You are reading facial expressions. You are modulating your tone. You are waiting for your turn to speak. You are managing the ego of the person across from you. This is exhausting work. It consumes a massive amount of cognitive fuel. More importantly, it forces your brain to remain in a reactive state. You are dodging and parrying the stimuli thrown at you by the environment. When the introvert retreats to their laboratory, that social processing center powers down. The energy that was being used to navigate small talk is suddenly freed up. It is redirected toward deep processing. This is where the observational power we discussed earlier truly ignites. In the previous segment, we talked about the introvert as a data gatherer. They notice the details that others miss, but data is useless without synthesis. You can collect a library full of books, but if you never read them and connect the concepts, they are just dead weight. Solitude is where the reading happens. It is where the introvert takes the thousands of micro-observations they made during the day and begins to weave them into a coherent tapestry. This is the process of incubation. It is a psychological reality that complex problems are rarely solved by brute force or by talking about them loudly. They are solved when the mind is allowed to wander through the quiet. The brain needs a lack of external input to form new internal connections. This is why you might struggle with a problem all day at work, only to have the solution appear instantly while you are taking a shower or walking alone at night. The noise stopped. The laboratory opened. For the introvert, this is a competitive advantage that borders on unfair, while their extroverted counterparts are out, frantically networking, attending happy hours, and filling every silence with chatter. The introvert is often engaged in what psychologists call deliberate practice. This is the kind of solitary, focused effort that is required to master a skill. It is the musician practicing scales for 4 hours. It is the coder writing lines in the dark. It is the writer staring at the blank page until the structure of the novel reveals itself. This capacity to sit with oneself is a superpower in an economy that runs on distraction. We live in an attention economy, where every app and advertisement is designed to fracture your focus. The person who can sit in a room alone, without fidgeting, without reaching for their phone, and apply their mind to a single task for hours at a time is becoming a rare species. That rarity creates value. The introvert does not need to be entertained by the outside world because they are entertaining themselves with the construction of their own competence. This is why quiet people often win in the long run. They are not winning the contest of who can shout the loudest in the meeting. They are winning the war of attrition. They are building intellectual capital, while others are spending social capital. Let us dismantle the stigma that surrounds the need for this solitude. Society often labels the person who leaves the party early as antisocial or awkward. The colleague who eats lunch in their car is seen as strange. We need to reframe these behaviors, not as acts of withdrawal, but as acts of preservation and strategy. When the introvert steps away, they are not running away from the world. They are securing their perimeter. They are acknowledging that their energy is a finite resource, and they are choosing to invest it where it yields the highest return. They are refusing to squander their cognitive potential on trivialities. In this laboratory, the introvert is also free from the distortion of groupthink. When we are in a group, there is a tremendous psychological pressure to conform. We nod along with bad ideas to avoid conflict. We dilute our own insights to fit the consensus. But in solitude, the introvert is free to explore the unorthodox. They can follow a line of reasoning to its logical conclusion without fear of judgment. This is where originality is born. It is very difficult to be original when you are constantly mirroring the behavior of the herd. So, how does the quiet person utilize this laboratory? Effectively, it requires a ruthless defense of one's time. It means learning to say no without guilt. It means recognizing that your downtime is actually your work time. It is the time when you sharpen the blade. If you are an introvert, you must stop apologizing for your nature. You must stop feeling guilty for needing the door closed. That closed door is not a barrier to your success. It is the container for it. The world will always try to pry that door open. It will demand your immediate response. It will demand your presence. It will try to convince you that if you are not seen, you do not exist. You must resist this pressure. You must trust the process of the laboratory. Because when you eventually emerge from that room, you do not come out empty-handed. You come out with the solution that the loud brainstorming session missed. You come out with the finished manuscript. You come out with the strategic plan that has accounted for every variable. The extrovert brings energy to the room. The introvert brings the blueprint. In the next segment, we will look at how to deploy that blueprint. We have gathered the data. We have processed it in the laboratory. Now we must look at the method of delivery. We will explore how the quiet person navigates the intricate dance of influence without ever raising their voice. We will discuss the art of soft power and how to move mountains without touching them. But for now, sit in the quiet. Appreciate the silence. It is not empty. It is full of potential. It is where you build the victory before the battle even begins. The art of deep listening. Imagine a chaotic boardroom or a crowded dinner party. The air is thick with voices competing for dominance. It is a battle of decibels and quick wit. We have been conditioned to believe that the person holding the floor is the person holding the power. We assume that the loudest voice in the room is the smartest or the most capable. This is the great illusion of the extroverted ideal. We mistake volume for authority and silence for submission. But look closer at that room. Scan past the man, gesturing wildly at the head of the table. Look past the woman, interrupting her colleague to make a point. In the corner, or perhaps seated, quietly near the center, there is someone else. They are not speaking. Their eyes are moving. They are tracking the flow of the conversation. Not just as a series of statements, but as a map of human psychology. This is the introvert engaged in their most potent active ability. This is the art of deep listening. Deep listening is not merely the act of hearing words. Hearing is an acoustic event. It is the physical process of sound waves hitting the eardrum. That is passive. Deep listening is cognitive. It is analytical. It is an act of high-level processing that requires a tremendous amount of mental energy. While the extrovert often uses the conversation to formulate their next sentence, the introvert uses the conversation to build a model of reality. There is a distinct difference in how these two personality types approach a dialogue. For many, the period, while another person is speaking, is simply a waiting room. They are waiting for their turn to broadcast. They are rehearsing their rebuttal. They are checking for a pause in the breath of their counterpart, so they can jump in and seize the narrative. They listen to respond. The introvert listens to understand. This sounds like a soft skill or a sentimental platitude, but it is actually a strategic weapon. When you listen to understand, you are gathering intelligence. You are collecting data points that the speaker is often unknowingly revealing. Consider the mechanics of a negotiation. Information is the currency of negotiation. The person who speaks the most is the person who is spending their currency. They are revealing their position. They are exposing their anxieties. They are outlining their limitations. Every word they speak gives the other side more surface area to attack or to maneuver around. The person who listens is hoarding currency. They are giving away nothing while collecting everything. By remaining quiet, they force the other party to fill the void. Human beings are socially conditioned to find silence uncomfortable when there is a lull. In the conversation, the nervous talker will rush to fill it. In that rush, they often say more than they intended. They reveal the weakness in their argument. They offer a concession just to break the tension. The introvert sits comfortably in that tension. They have lived in the laboratory of solitude. They are not afraid of the quiet. They let the silence stretch out. They let it do the heavy lifting. This is a power move that does not require a single shout. It relies entirely on the pressure of presence. Deep listening also allows for the detection of the subtext. Communication is only partially verbal. a massive percentage of human interaction is tonal and physical. It is in the tightening of a jaw. It is in the split-second hesitation before answering a difficult question. It is in the pitch of a voice when a specific topic is raised, because the introvert is not preoccupied with what they are going to say next. Their processing power is free to analyze these subtle signals. They hear the tremor of insecurity behind the arrogant statement. They see the fleeting micro-expression of anger behind the polite smile. They are reading the room in high definition while everyone else is watching in low resolution. This observational capacity turns the listener into a lie detector. It is very difficult to deceive someone who is paying absolute attention to the nuance of your behavior. The loud charisma that dazzles. Others often falls flat on the introvert because they are analyzing the structure of the charm rather than getting swept away by it. They see the machinery behind the curtain. Furthermore, deep listening fosters a profound level of connection that can be leveraged for leadership in a world where everyone is shouting. Being truly heard is a rare and intoxicating experience. When an introvert focuses their beam of attention on a single person, that person feels validated. They feel important. This creates loyalty. A leader who listens is a leader who understands the needs and the motivations of their team. They do not need to guess what drives their employees or their friends. They know because they have been paying attention. They have filed away the details that others ignored. They remember the names of children. They remember the specific frustrations mentioned in passing 3 months ago. When the introvert finally does speak, their words carry a weight that the constant talker can never achieve. This is the principle of scarcity. If you speak all day, your words decrease in value. If you speak rarely, your words become events. Think of the dynamic in a serious meeting. The chatter continues for 20 minutes, with people talking over one another. Arguments go in circles. Then, the quiet person leans forward. The room instinctively settles. They have not wasted a single syllable yet. Everyone knows that if they are breaking their silence, it must be for a reason. The introvert speaks 1 or 2 sentences. These sentences cut through the noise, because they are synthesized from 20 minutes of deep analysis. They summarize the problem and offer the solution that everyone else missed because they were too busy trying to be heard. This is the sniper shot from the previous segment applied to conversation. This ability requires patience. It requires the discipline to suppress the ego. The ego wants to be recognized immediately. The ego wants to show off its intelligence right now. The introvert is willing to delay that gratification. They are willing to look like the least important person in the room for the first hour, so they can be the most effective person in the room for the final outcome. There is a biological component to this. As well, the introverted brain is highly sensitive to dopamine and overstimulation. This sensitivity makes them naturally averse to small talk and superficial chatter, which are essentially noise without signal. They crave depth because depth is where the signal lives. Deep listening is the mining of that signal. It is an active search for meaning. It forces the listener to slow down the world. In a culture that worships speed, slowing down is a revolutionary act. It allows for critical thinking to occur in real time. Most people react. Something happens, and they immediately discharge an emotional or verbal reaction. The deep listener inserts a buffer between the stimulus and the response. In that buffer, they evaluate the validity of what they are hearing. They check it against what they already know. They look for logical fallacies. They strip away the emotional manipulation. By the time they respond, they are responding to the core of the issue, not the surface presentation. This drives people crazy in arguments. Because the introvert refuses to take the bait, they do not get pulled into the chaotic emotional spiral. They stay anchored in the facts that they have carefully collected. This is not to say that introverts are psychic or infallible. It is simply that their default setting prioritizes intake over output. It prioritizes reception over transmission. In an information age, the receiver is the one who learns. The transmitter only repeats what it already knows. You cannot learn while you are talking. You can only recite your existing database. To upgrade that database, you must stop transmitting and switch to high-gain reception. You must listen, not just with your ears, but with your intellect and your intuition. The myth of the strong silent type exists for a reason. It is an archetype rooted in the reality that silence is often a sign of self-control, and self-control is the ultimate indicator of strength. The person who cannot stop talking is often a person who cannot regulate their own internal state. They are leaking energy. The deep listener is a sealed vessel. They contain their energy. They accumulate pressure. When they release that pressure, it is directed and purposeful. So, as we navigate a world that demands we build a personal brand and shout our virtues from the rooftops, it is vital to remember the advantage of the observer. While the multitude fights for the microphone, the introvert studies the audience. While the crowd pushes for the spotlight, the introvert manages the stage. They win not by being the loudest, but by being the most informed. They win because, while everyone else was busy trying to be interesting, they were busy being interested. And in the end, the person who understands the most controls the outcome. The art of deep listening is the foundation of the introvert's influence. It is the soil from which their insights grow. But listening is only the first phase of the operation. Once the data is gathered and the analysis is complete, there comes a moment of action. The mind must shift from reception to creation. This brings us to the next critical advantage. We must understand how the introvert takes this gathered intelligence and transmutes it into something tangible. We must enter the engine room of their creativity. The reluctant leader. History is littered with the wreckage of charismatic men and women who believed that the volume of their voice correlated with the validity of their ideas. We have been conditioned to look for leadership in the spotlight. We expect our captains of industry and our heads of state to be distinct figures who command a room. The moment they enter, we look for the height, the booming projection, and the unshakable certainty of the extrovert. We mistake confidence for competence. We confuse the desire to be seen with the ability to lead. But there is another archetype that moves quietly through the corridors of power. This is the reluctant leader. They are the individuals who never asked for the crown. They did not maneuver through office politics to seize the corner office for the sake of the view. They did not seek authority to feed a hungry ego. Instead, they assumed command because the situation demanded it. They stepped up because they looked around and realized that the loud voices had no plan. They took the helm because they cared more about the survival of the ship than the glory of the captaincy. When we peel back the layers of effective management and historical impact, we find a surprising truth. The most sustainable and transformative leadership often comes from those who are naturally introverted. This seems counterintuitive. In a culture that celebrates the cult of personality, we are taught that to lead, you must be a social dynamo. You must be the life of the party and the loudest orator on the stage. However, the reluctant leader possesses a specific set of tools that the extroverted alpha often lacks. The first of these tools is the absence of a fragile ego. When a leader is obsessed with their own image, They consume all the oxygen in the room. They view the ideas of others as threats to their dominance. They treat talented subordinates as rivals rather than assets. The loud leader needs to be the smartest person in the room at all times. This creates a bottleneck. If the leader is the only source of inspiration, the organization can only grow as fast as that one person's brain can process information. The introverted leader operates differently because they do not crave the spotlight. They are happy to shine it on others. They create a vacuum of power that invites their team to step forward. This is not weakness. It is a strategic delegation of intellect. By listening more than they speak, the reluctant leader turns their team into an engine of innovation. They allow proactive employees to run with ideas. They do not feel the need to stamp their name on every initiative. Consider the dynamics of a boardroom meeting. The extroverted leader dominates the conversation. They interrupt. They steer the dialogue back to their own anecdotes. The staff quickly learns that the meeting is a performance and they are merely the audience. They stop solving problems and start managing the leader's emotions. Now contrast this with the reluctant leader. They sit at the head of the table, but they do not loom over it. They open the floor. They ask questions rather than issuing edicts. They are comfortable with silence. In that silence, the team is forced to think. The introverted leader absorbs the data points from the marketing director and the concerns of the engineer. They act as a processor. They synthesize the disparate threads of information into a coherent strategy. When they finally speak, the room listens not out of fear, but out of anticipation. They know that the leader has actually heard them. This creates a profound loyalty. People do not want to be ruled. They want to be heard. The reluctant leader validates the intelligence of their workforce. This is why quiet leaders often preside over teams that are self-sufficient and highly motivated. The team knows they have the autonomy to execute their vision without being micromanaged by a boss who needs to prove they are in charge. There is also a distinctive advantage in how the reluctant leader handles crisis. When disaster strikes, the adrenaline response of the high-energy extrovert can sometimes lead to impulsivity. The desire to do something immediately can override the need to do the right thing. Panic masks itself as action. The loud leader might shout orders to maintain the illusion of control. The introvert retreats to the laboratory of solitude. They are accustomed to processing information internally. They do not need to externalize their anxiety. They step back from the chaos to view the chessboard. This pause is often mistaken for hesitation by their critics, but it is not hesitation. It is calibration. In the midst of a fire, the person who takes 3 seconds to locate the exit is more valuable than the person who immediately starts running. In circles, the reluctant leader is grounded in reality rather than rhetoric. Because they are not sustained by the applause of the crowd, they are less likely to fall victim to their own hype. They are the data gatherers we spoke of earlier. They look at the balance sheet and see the numbers, as they are not as they wish them to be. They are painfully realistic. This realism preserves organizations. While the charismatic visionary might drive a company off a cliff while promising that the car can fly, the reluctant leader checks the brakes. History provides us with the ultimate validation of this archetype. Some of the most transformational figures in human history were known for their reserve. They were individuals who preferred the company of books to the roar of the crowd. They were plagued by self-doubt. They wrestled with their decisions. In the quiet hours of the night, this struggle is what made them great. A leader who never doubts themselves is a danger to everyone around them. The reluctant leader doubts constantly, and that doubt drives them to verify their facts and refine their strategy. They lead with a quiet will. This is a concept that researchers have identified in the highest performing companies. It is a paradoxical blend of personal humility and professional will. They are modest and understated, but they are relentless when it comes to the objective. They are plow horses rather than show horses. The extroverted leader often views the organization as a platform for their own ascent. The reluctant leader views the organization as something that must endure beyond them. They build institutions that can function without them. This is the ultimate act of leadership. It is the suppression of the self for the sake of the cause. We must stop viewing introversion as a barrier to leadership. It is not a hurdle to be overcome. It is a distinct style of command that is increasingly necessary in a complex world. We do not need more noise. We do not need more aggressive posturing. We have enough people screaming for attention. What we need are people who can sit with a difficult problem for days without needing to tweet about it. We need leaders who can listen to a dissenting opinion without feeling attacked. We need the calm hand on the tiller. We need the person who leads, not because they enjoy the power, but because they feel a deep responsibility to the outcome. The reluctant leader wins because they play a different game. They are not playing for the approval of the audience. They are playing for the success of the mission. And while the loud ones are busy fighting for the microphone, the quiet ones are busy changing the world. They prove that you do not need to shout to be heard. You simply need to have something to say that is worth hearing. The battery life metaphor. Imagine yourself standing in the center of a crowded banquet hall. The air is thick and heavy with the hum of 100 overlapping conversations. Glasses clink sharply against silverware. Laughter erupts in sporadic, unpredictable bursts from the corners of the room. The lighting is just a little too bright, and the music is just a little too loud. For some people in this room, this chaotic environment is a fueling station. You watch them move from group to group, with a bounding, restless energy. With every handshake and every exchange of pleasantries, they seem to grow brighter. They get louder. They become more alive. They are feeding on the external stimulation, as if they are plugging themselves directly into the electrical grid of the crowd. But you are different. You can navigate the room. You can smile and ask the right questions. You can shake the hands and play the game. But with every single interaction, you feel a tangible physical cost. It is as if you have an internal meter ticking down behind your eyes. You started the evening at 100% capacity. After the first hour of small talk, you were down to 70. Now, as the dessert is being served, you can feel the warning, light flashing red. At 10%, you are not anxious. You are not afraid of these people. You are not shy. You are simply empty. This is the battery life metaphor. It remains the single most accurate way to understand the physiological difference between the introvert and the extrovert. It is not a matter of confidence. It is a matter of energy economics. To understand why quiet people eventually win, we have to understand the specific mechanics of this fuel source and why a battery that drains quickly is actually a sign of a high-performance engine. Let us look at the mechanics of the extrovert. First, to understand the contrast, the extrovert functions like a solar panel or perhaps a wind turbine. They require external input to generate power. If you put an extrovert in a quiet room with no sensory input and no human feedback, they wilt, they lose energy, They become lethargic and restless. They need the wind of conversation and the light of attention. To spin their turbines, the world outside is their battery charger. The introvert, conversely, is a self-contained battery system. You wake up in the morning with a full tank of energy. It is all you have for the day. It is a finite resource. Every action you take is an expenditure. Every conversation costs a few percentage points. Every bright light and loud noise drains a little more. When the battery is empty, you cannot simply shout louder or socialize more. To get energy back, that would be like driving a car on an empty tank. Hoping it will generate gas, you must disconnect. You must plug into solitude to recharge. Society has often looked at this mechanic and labeled it a defect. They ask why you cannot keep up with the group for 12 hours straight. They ask why you need to leave the party early. They mistake your empty battery for a lack of stamina or a lack of interest. But this view misses the crucial reason why your battery drains so fast. Think of a high-performance laptop computer. If you leave it in sleep mode with the screen off, the battery lasts for days. But if you are running complex rendering software and editing, high-definition video and calculating massive datasets, simultaneously, the fans spin up and the battery drains in 2 hours. The battery does not drain because the machine is broken. It drains because the machine is doing heavy work. This is the secret that turns the battery life metaphor from a liability into a massive advantage. Introverts drain quickly because they are processing reality at a much higher resolution than their extroverted counterparts. When an extrovert has a conversation, they are often just surfing the surface of the interaction. They are enjoying the volley of words. They are reacting in the moment. You are doing something else entirely. You are listening to the words, but you are also analyzing the tone of voice. You are cross-referencing what is being said now with what was said 10 minutes ago to check for consistency. You are reading micro-expressions around the eyes and mouth. You are absorbing the emotional temperature of the room. You are analyzing the subtext of the silence between the sentences. Your brain is running a high-intensity observational program. Of course, your battery is dying. You are computing more data in an hour than some people process in a week. This sensitivity is not a weakness. It is a data-gathering superpower that comes with a heavy energy tax. We must also look at the chemical incentives at play here. The human brain runs on neurotransmitters, and the most famous of these is dopamine. It is the reward chemical. It is the sensation of excitement and pursuit. Extroverts have a low sensitivity to dopamine. They need a lot of it to feel good. This is why they seek out risk and noise in crowds. They are chasing the high because they are numb to the subtle joys. Introverts are highly sensitive to dopamine. A little bit goes a very long way. Too much dopamine leads to overstimulation and exhaustion. Instead, introverts thrive on a different chemical pathway associated with a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. This is the chemical of focus and deep thought and calm. It induces a state of relaxation and alertness. It powers the ability to sit still and think deeply for hours. This biological reality forces the introvert to become a master of resource management. Because you know your energy is finite, you become discerning. You do not spend your words cheaply. You do not invest your time in low-value interactions. The extrovert can afford to scatter their energy like a shotgun blast because they can always get more just by walking into a crowded bar. You are a sniper. You have a limited number of rounds in the chamber. This scarcity forces you to aim. It forces you to choose the interactions that actually matter. This creates an aura of value around the introvert. When you speak, people listen, because you do not speak simply to hear your own voice. You speak only when the expenditure of energy is worth the result. Your battery acts as a filter for quality control. When the battery finally hits zero and you retreat to the sanctuary of your home or your office, this is not a retreat in the military sense. You are not fleeing the battlefield. You are entering the processing plant. During the recharge phase, the introvert is not doing nothing. While the body rests, the mind is integrating the massive amounts of data collected during the expenditure phase. This is why introverts often come back a day later with the perfect solution to a problem, while the extroverts were still talking and looking for more stimulation. You went offline to compute the answer. You took the raw data of the day and synthesized it into wisdom. Consider the tactical advantage of the pause in a negotiation or a debate. The person who feels the need to fill every silence is the one who reveals their hand. They burn energy nervously. They talk to keep their internal turbines spinning. The introvert sits in the silence. They are comfortable with the pause because they are conserving battery power. This silence unnerves the opponent. It draws out information. It shifts the power dynamic. You are the one controlling the flow of energy. You are the one deciding when to spend and when to save. So, do not envy the solar panels that need the constant glare of the sun to function. Do not apologize for the fact that you need to unplug. Your need for downtime is the receipt for your high level of engagement. It is the proof that you were paying attention when no one else was. The world is noisy and it is exhausting, and it will take everything you have if you let it. But you have a gift that the noise cannot touch. You have the ability to step away. You have the ability to recharge. And when you come back with a full battery and a processed plan, you bring a focused power that the constant noisemakers can never replicate. The battery life is not a limit. It is a discipline. And in a world of endless distraction, discipline is the ultimate competitive advantage, the digital equalizer. For centuries, the structure of influence was physical. It was bound by the laws of acoustics and the geometry of the meeting room. Power belonged to the person who sat at the head of the table. It belonged to the voice that could project to the back of the hall without faltering. It belonged to the quick wit who could snap back a retort in a fraction of a second. This was the era of the backslap and the firm handshake. In that world, the introvert was often at a structural disadvantage, no matter how brilliant the idea. It could easily be drowned out by a charismatic colleague with a louder baritone and a hunger for attention. If you could not dominate the sensory environment, you often could not dominate the direction of the group. Then, the terrain shifted. It happened slowly. At first with the telex and the fax, and then violently with the arrival of the internet. We entered the age of the digital equalizer. This transition fundamentally altered the physics of communication in a way that disproportionately favored the quiet temperament. The digital world stripped away the requirement for immediate physical dominance and replaced it with a demand for clarity, substance, and endurance. Consider the architecture of a standard email or a text-based forum. In these spaces, the volume of your voice is irrelevant. You cannot shout in a code repository. You cannot use physical intimidation in a strategy document. When the medium of exchange becomes the written word, the playing field flattens. The person who speaks first or loudest no longer automatically wins. Instead, the victory goes to the person who formulates the most coherent argument. This is where the observational power of the introvert becomes a digital weapon. In the physical world, the pause is a liability. If someone asks you a question in a board meeting and you sit in silence for 30 seconds to process your thoughts, the tension in the room becomes palpable. People perceive that silence as hesitation or lack of confidence. The extrovert fills that silence. Instinctively, they think while they speak. They process out loud. In the digital realm, however, that 30-second pause is invisible. It does not exist. When an email arrives or a message pops up on a screen, the recipient has the luxury of time. This is the power of asynchronous communication. It allows the introvert to retreat into their laboratory of solitude to analyze the data, to draft a response and to edit that response until it is razor sharp. By the time they hit send, the hesitation is gone. All that remains is the polished diamond of a well-considered idea. The digital wall acts as a filter that removes the social anxiety of the moment and leaves only the intellectual competence. We must also look at the rise of the remote work revolution. This was not merely a logistical change. It was a cultural upheaval that dismantled the cult of personality. In a traditional office, presence is often confused with productivity. The person who walks around the office, stopping at desks and laughing loudly, is perceived as engaged and active. The person sitting quietly in the corner, with headphones on, is sometimes viewed as disconnected. Remote work destroyed that illusion. When you strip away the office theatrics, all that remains is the output. A manager cannot see who is being charming by the water cooler. They can only see who delivered the project. They can only see the code that works, or the copy that converts, or the strategy that yields profit. In this environment, the performative aspects of work vanish. The introvert who focused on deep work and ignored the social politics suddenly rises to the top of the leaderboard. Their battery life is not drained by commuting or forced socialization, so they channel that conserved energy into the work itself. Furthermore, the internet is essentially a giant library that requires constant curation. It is a system built on information retrieval and pattern recognition. These are the native behaviors of the introvert. While the extrovert may excel at the cocktail party, the introvert excels at the search query. The ability to sit alone for hours, sifting through data, learning a new software, or connecting disparate pieces of information is a superpower. In an economy based on knowledge, the internet rewards depth. In the early days of social media, there was a fear that it would just be a digital version of high school where the popular kids reigned supreme. While that dynamic exists on the surface, the underlying machinery of the internet favors the specialist. If you are obsessed with a niche topic, if you are a listener who has spent years understanding the nuance of a specific problem, you can build a massive audience without ever raising your voice. You can write, you can curate, you can build. The nature of digital influence is cumulative. In a face-to-face interaction, the impression you make fades once you leave the room. You have to constantly maintain it with new interactions. Digital creations, however, are permanent assets. An article written 3 years ago can still influence people today. A piece of code written once can run 1,000 times a day. This appeals to the introvert's preference for efficiency and long-term planning. They do not need to be on stage every night. They can build a stage that operates while they sleep. This shift has created a meritocracy of ideas rather than a meritocracy of volume. We see this in the titans of the digital age. Many of the architects of our modern world are not the loud backslapping salesmen of the past. They are the engineers, the writers, and the designers, who spent their formative years observing rather than participating. They built the platforms that the loud people now use. The digital equalizer has also redefined leadership. We are moving away from the command and control style of the general barking orders. We are moving toward the thoughtful guidance of the system architect. In a digital organization, leadership is often about written communication. It is about setting clear goals in documentation. It is about empathy expressed through flexibility. These are areas where the quiet leader shines. They listen to the feedback loops. They analyze the metrics without emotional bias. They do not need to be the center of attention to be the center of progress. It is important to understand that this does not mean the extrovert is obsolete. It simply means the monopoly is over. The extrovert must now compete on grounds that were once the sanctuary of the introvert. They must learn to write clearly. They must learn to work alone. They must learn that in a Zoom meeting with the cameras, off charisma counts for very little, if the logic is flawed. For the introvert, this is the moment of liberation. The tools of the trade are now aligned with your natural disposition. The screen protects you from the energy drain of physical crowds. The keyboard gives you the time to perfect your words. The internet connects you to other minds, based on shared interests rather than shared geography. You no longer need to pretend to be someone else. To succeed, you do not need to attend the networking mixer and force a smile until your face hurts. You can stay home. You can make a cup of tea. You can sit in silence and let your mind wander through the complex problems you enjoy solving. And then, when you are ready, you can type your solution and send it out into the world. In the digital age, your impact is not measured by decibels. It is measured by the signal you provide in a world drowning in noise. The quiet person does not win by becoming loud. They win because the world finally built a machine that listens to thoughts instead of just voices. The quiet revolution. We have journeyed from the misconception that volume equals value to the realization that silence is a strategic asset. You have seen how the sniper outlasts the machine gun and how the deep listener uncovers truths that the noisy crowd misses. This brings us to the final truth of your quiet revolution. It is not a movement defined by marching in the streets or shouting over others. It is an internal shift where you stop viewing your temperament as a liability and accept it as a distinct competitive edge. The world will always be filled with noise and the relentless demand for extroverted performance. Yet, you do not need to play by those rules. To win, your strength lies in the pause before the reaction and the analysis before the action. By conserving your energy for the moments that truly matter, you become the most effective person in the room. This is the ultimate victory of the introvert. You do not need to become someone else to succeed. You simply need to apply the observational power you already possess. The quiet revolution begins not when you speak up, but when you finally recognize the weight of your own silence.